Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here. I want to thank everybody again for hopping on. If you guys have any questions, please post them in the questions box. I'm going to take as much time as needed after the webinar to answer all of your guys' questions. Today, we're going to be going over Networking Basics 101 Part 2. Hopefully, you guys caught the first part, which was did 2 weeks ago. It was on wireless networks. And today, we're going to be going over hardwired networks, the infrastructure behind it. So my name is Chris Scanlan. I'm a sales engineer at Capital Sales. If you guys haven't been on any of the webinars before, or we haven't talked, I want to thank you guys for taking the time and learning about it. So without further ado, we're going to get into hardwired networks. First one, obviously the biggest question, how to connect the network. Okay, so in this basic network that you're looking at here, there's physical connection design below. My question to you guys is this the proper way to connect the network? Okay, a lot of people would say, yeah. I mean, if you look, you've got the WAN connection going to the router is going to multiple switches and going out to the devices. Will this work? Yes, it'll work. Is it the proper way to do it and the best way to do it? No, it is not. The actual best way to do it is to have one connection from the router to your master switch. And the master switch is actually going to be the largest switch on your network. And we're going to get into the reason why in a little bit. And then you're going to want to connect your additional switches off of that master switch. You're also going to want to group similar devices on the same switch. The less switches in a system, the better, because every time you add a switch, you're adding a delay. So when you do, what happens when you have two routers? We're going to go through this. We're going to go actually through this, start with the router, go into the switches and endpoints. Okay, so the first one is the router. Nowadays, all internet service providers, or most of them, are trying to push their routers, and sometimes they don't even supply a modem router, just a standard modem. They only have a modem router. So what happens? Well, you've got your ISP's modem router combo. If you guys don't know what ISP stands for, it's Internet Service Provider. What happens when you have the ISP's modem router combo and you've got your router? Okay, you've got a WAN connection coming in and you have a LAN connection coming out and going to your router. Okay, this is going to cause problems. This is what they call a double NAT, okay? Two networks, a network underneath a network, and this will wreak havoc on most systems. So how do you fix this? What you want to have is a WAN connection coming in. You ideally want to switch that modem router to just a modem so it repasses that public IP address to your router. Obviously, this is the best option. Your ISP provides only a modem. If they don't provide only a modem, most modem routers, you can set it to bridge mode, which virtually turns it into strictly a modem. Okay, sometimes you have to call the ISP and they will do this for you. If you have an ISP that doesn't do this, you're going to need to set it into a DMZ, demilitarized zone, meaning it's going to virtually make a straight port, straight tunnel all the way through that router, and that's going to stop any firewalls from blocking it. So the best one is to get a modem only. Next option, set the modem router into bridge mode. Sometimes you got to call the ISP. Worst case scenario, set it into DMZ mode. Now, we took care of that ISP's modem router issue. Let's get into routers. I'm going to talk a lot today about Luxel because it is our #1 selling networking line that we have. It's a great line that's been designed strictly for the CI industry. And you'll notice a lot of these items, there's no ports on the front of it like you see a lot of times. Everything's on the back, or most of their devices, the ports are on the back. And that's because in the CI industry, we are installing this stuff in the rack. And a lot of times the end users are trying to get to this. Okay, it's not going into, you don't have an IT department that's taking care of it. We want to try and hide all those ports and make sure that nobody's going to get in there and start plugging in unplugging and switching your own cables. So the XWR 4500 is their first, is their lower end. When I say lower end, it doesn't mean it's bad, but it's their starting out rack-mounted router. This replaces the ABR 4400, and what you get out of going up to the 45 from the 44, they've upgraded the processing power, the RAM. It's just bigger, better, faster. I mean, they needed to upgrade. This is what you get, okay? This is positioned right between the XWR, which is the wireless router. I talked about that in part 1. We're going to go over it again in part 2, and the ABR 5000. Now, one thing to keep in mind, guys, just because when you're looking at gigabit routers, that does not mean that a gigabit router is always able to take a full gigabit WAN connection, okay? And that comes down to mainly processing power and RAM and everything else behind it. This one actually is able to support, they state 500 to 600. I've been able to get more than that out of this, but if you look at the documents, it's going to say 5 to 600 LAN to WAN throughput, okay? So if you've got a customer that's paying for a full gigabit, you know, fiber, full gigabit up and down to their house, you're not going to want to go with the ABR 4500. You're going to want to go to the ABR 5000. The ABR 5000 gives you a full WAN to LAN throughput. And if you notice, it's got dual WAN ports on it. You can actually do load balancing. You can do failovers. You can do a lot of stuff with this. This is a mean rack-mounted router. Again, all the ports are on the back. Makes it much easier for installs and very clean rack on the front. You can change the LED indicators on all of the Luxel gear from green to blue. Really cool products. What you also get is a 1.2 gigahertz processor, dedicated dual WAN, like I mentioned, 5 ports of LAN connection, so not 4, but 5. Also USB 3.0 file sharing. So it has DLNA server built right into it. So you can actually have an external hard drive plugged into this if you're doing this in a residential installation or in a small commercial and they want to throw and basically use this as their small server for file sharing. Great little product. Wireless routers. Luxel offers the XWR 3100. This replaces the old XWR 1750. It is a concurrent dual band. It also has a wireless controller built into it. Okay, I'm not going to get into wireless controllers and access points or anything else. That was part 1. If you guys missed part 1, you guys can go back and either watch the videos, we do have them posted, or definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you guys about wireless controllers, access points, how to design a proper wireless system. You can reach out to myself, the account manager, Capital, anybody's here to help you. So this does actually have a built-in wireless controller. It's a smaller one. It can support up to 2 other access points above the built-in wireless in the wireless router. The built-in wireless is also a 4x4 AC, Wave 2. It also has 3.0 USB file sharing on it. And then we can get down to the baby wireless router. Small little house. It's got an XWR 1200. It's replaced the 600. It also has concurrent dual band. It's not AC. It's got this one does also have wireless controller built into it with up to 2 additional access points capable, 2x2 antenna, 2.0 file sharing. I'm going really quick, guys, on this stuff, so we just have a lot to cover. Obviously, you guys are here for more how it works, less on just some hardware. Managed switches. Okay, this is really the backbone. A lot of people say the router is the heart of it. Honestly, when you're looking at infrastructure, the switch that you're getting is the backbone of your system, okay, for a hardwired network. Because, like I said, in that proper design we first looked at, the switch is the heart of it. Everything plugs into the switch. Okay, so switch types, you're going to really want to know the difference in switches. Switch types, fast internet, gigabit, okay? There's unmanaged switches, there's managed switches, there's PoE switches, and also the number of ports. So there's a wide range of switches. If you also look at the pictures, there's switches with the ports on the front. Maybe you're doing camera systems or patch panels in a commercial environment. You need to be able to switch stuff back and forth. Or this is going into a facility that doesn't have an IT department, so you want to lock everything up. There's also switches with ports on the back. Switch layers. Okay, when you're also looking at switches and you get into managed switches, there's a layer 2, which most of you guys are never going to go above a layer 2 or need more than a layer 2 switch. But there is some applications where you need a layer 3 switch. And the layer 3 switch actually gives you the ability to do IP address and protocol aware more than just MAC filtering. So it also can be used for routing. So you don't need a router with a layer 3 managed switch, which again, most of you guys aren't going to run into that, but it has the capability to. So with switches, the biggest question is what switch should I use? We just went through, there's fast, there's unmanaged, there's managed, there's PoE, there's so many different options. Okay. Unmanaged switch, you don't touch. It's plug and play. It's just a basic workhorse. You need more ports, you get an unmanaged switch. If you don't need to do any special configuration in the switch, you can just grab an unmanaged switch. Okay, there's not much more about it. Managed switches. Managed switches give you the ability to get in and configure so much stuff. I mean, it has a web UI, most of them do. It gives you statistics, monitoring, troubleshooting, so it's much nicer to be able to get in and see why some things may not be working. It also gives you the ability to set up VLANs for guest networks, separate networks if you're getting the commercial environments, a lot of stuff with VLANs. There's also spanning tree protocols. There's QoS services if you're doing VoIP phones. Also PoE management, power over Ethernet, and routing for larger networks. Now, best practice, Luxel states best practice, if you're doing 3 or more 24 port switches, you need at least one managed. Okay. Now, they state again, if you're doing 3 or more 24 port switches, at least one of those should be managed. My best practice to you guys is the first switch you buy, if you need one switch, if you need 3 switches in a system, like we said, the first switch, the main switch is the backbone of your system. Okay, that one should be a managed switch. That should be a 24 port, 12, whatever it is. You should get a managed switch for your master switch because then you can go in, it future-proofs it. Okay, you can add on managed switches below it, but you want to have that managed switch to be able to set up VLANs, guest networks, all of that stuff. Now, PoE. Most of you guys have heard PoE in the past. If you're doing cameras, if you're doing access points, there's so many devices that use PoE. But what is it? Okay, PoE is power and data on one cable. Over one Cat5, it's supplying power to the device as well as data. Okay, it can do power up to the standard 100 meters. It doesn't require a licensed electrician. A lot of us, depending on the state you're in, you can't pull power lines. Now, if you can get a PoE device, you can pull that. You don't need to be a licensed electrician to pull a Cat5, a Cat6 cable, and run PoE over it. Source can be a standalone injector, meaning the power supply can be a standalone PoE injector, as you see below, or a switch that has PoE built in. Now, some people have said in the past, if you're doing PoE, there's a degradation of performance. PoE does not degrade the signal. It doesn't. There's no degradation of performance if you're using PoE. Also, with PoE, we're going to talk a little more about PoE because there's different types. A lot of people don't know that there's actually different types of PoE. There's the legacy PoE, which is simply, it puts power on the line. Okay. There's a PoE 802.3AF standard, which is a standard PoE, not PoE plus. This is 15.4 watts per port, meaning if it's a PoE standard device, it will take up to 15.4 watts. All right, it introduced also the communication between the source and the device over the same cable. Now, a lot of devices are needing more power. You've got cameras with heaters in them. You've got high-powered access points. You've got outdoor access points. There's a lot of devices that are now, they're putting more stuff into these access points or cameras or other devices that need more power. So they created a new standard, which is 802.3 AT, and that is actually 30 watts per port. Okay, meaning if it's a PoE device, it's rated above, it's going to take anywhere from 15.4 up to 30 watts. So that lands in that PoE Plus range. If you have a PoE Plus switch, it is backwards compatible to standard PoE. Okay, so when in doubt, get a PoE Plus, is all I'm saying. All right. Also, PoE, all standard PoE is based on 48 volts. If you find a device that's an older camera or something that takes, let's say, 12 volts or 24 volts PoE, that's not standard. You do not want to power that from a standard PoE injector or the switch. You must use the PoE source that comes with that device or what's recommended for that device. So just keep aware, if it says 12 volt PoE, it's not going to be able to just plug directly into your PoE switch. A lot of times it'll be a step down transformer, which then it comes a little box. That little box goes between your PoE switch or injector to the device you're powering. Now, selecting a switch. Switches you want to make sure is full speed switch. You're always using a full speed switch. What does a full speed switch means? Okay, a full speed switch, the backplane should be double the amount of ports. So if it's a 24 port switch, it's going to be a 48 gig backbone if it's a gigabit switch. 24 ports gigs down, 24 gigs up at a full, which comes out to 48 gigs. PoE power budget. Okay, this is something also to really keep in mind about. If you're putting devices on a PoE switch, you want to make sure there's enough power built into that switch to power your devices. And Luxel does a great job of putting a lot of power in their PoE switches, so you don't have to worry about this as much. Some manufacturers, you may see it's a 24-port switch, 24-port PoE switch, or even PoE Plus switch, but it's 100 watts. Okay. Look at this. This example right here is for a 24-port switch with a 220 watt budget. You think 220 watts, that's a lot of power. Well, let's start looking at this. Okay, if it's those devices are only going to take 9 watts or 9.16 watts, that you can use all 24 ports. If it's using standard PoE, that's actually going to be a 15 watt rating, you can only use up to 14 of those ports to power this. And if it's PoE Plus devices, cameras with heaters, high-powered access points, and other devices, you're only going to be able to actually power 7 devices off of a 24-port switch. So know the requirements of your devices. Any PoE device should have the power rating on them. How many watts it's going to take? Okay, as well as the switch will have the power ratings on it. If it doesn't, you may want to run for the hills. If you see a PoE switch that doesn't have a power rating on it, you may not want to use it. You may want to look elsewhere. So really make sure that you know the requirements of your devices so you don't overdraw the power budget. We all know what happens when we suck more power than what the power supply is able to do. Okay, it burns out devices. We've talked a bit about some of the new, what Luxel does for the CI, AV network, whatever you want to call it. They've made a really nice series strictly for the CI AV market. All right, if you notice, all of the ports are in the back. You notice that the LEDs are green on some, blue on the other. There is a switch on the back to be able to change those. And they've got everything you need, from small port PoE powered switches with magnetic mounts, so that way you can take it and stick it in the back of the rack on the side because you ran out of rack spaces, or mount in a wall, whatever it is. Maybe you're putting it in a wall because you don't have power there. This can be powered via PoE or locally powered as well. Also, gigabit routers, rack-mounted gigabit routers, 12-port with 8 PoEs, 16-port unmanaged, 24-port unmanaged, 26-port managed with PoE. There's 10-gig stackable, which we're going to get into stacking switches in a minute here. That gets to be really fun. They also have security. They've got the switches with a 370-watt power budget for cameras, which is a 26-port, 24-port PoE gigabit managed switch. There's a 18-port with 16-port PoE, 250 watts. There's a 10-port with 130. There's an 8-port with 60 watts. Okay, there's a lot of switches to fit any need that you got. They also go up to not just Luxel, but they've got 52-port PoE plus switches. Okay, both non-stackable and stackable. Both of them have 50 ports plus 2 gigabit SFP or 2 10 gigabit SFP plus stacking ports. Okay, so if you go up to the 7048P, let's say you have a project that you need more than 48 ports. Okay, anytime you can go to a stackable switch, you'll see in a bit here, if your budget allows, go to stackable switches, because now it turns them into one switch. Much easier to manage, especially if you're doing VLANs, MAC filter, all of these different pieces that you need inside of a managed switch. If you're going to go more than one switch, if the budget allows, go to stackable. It makes life so much easier. These switches also have 740 watts power budget. And when you go to a stackable switches, the 7048, you can actually put up to 16 switches together, which actually, when you stack them, like I said, creates one switch. So 16 times 48, that's one large switch. One IP address to go in and manage. Everything's interrouted between 10 gig stacking cables. Really nice system. When we get into stacking switches, you look at that, it's one IP address. It shows both switches there, but it's virtually one switch. They're talking to each other. You're not routing VLANs, everything else. It turns into now, instead of a 24 port like you're looking here, it's a 48 port plus 4 more ports of 10 gig stacking. You can easily switch between them. All you're going to do is go through and set your switch ID. Most of you guys are going to leave the priority the same, okay? And which stacking ports you're going to use. And that's going to give you then the ability to go in and set up every aspect of every switch in there. And the VLANs all interroute. You don't have to try and go through one IP address, route to this port, then go out and reroute to this port for VLAN. It makes it much easier to manage. So if the budget allows, go to stacking switches. Let's get into troubleshooting. Because when we talk about networking, there's always troubleshooting involved, okay? And a lot of times it may not have anything to do with a device that you've supplied. It could be customer threw on a cheap 5-port switch and they're taking down a network. Somebody plugged in something rogue, an Apple Airport Express or something, and they've got DHCP enabled and nobody told you. Okay, we've all had customers that do that. Now it's your fault because the network doesn't work. So basic troubleshooting steps. So first of all, physical layer 1 troubleshooting, meaning what's my IP address? Is the stuff plugged in correctly? Okay, to isolate the issue. Layer 1 switches, it meaning if they're all unmanaged devices, there's not a lot of troubleshooting you can do except for what's plugged in. Am I getting the correct IP address? And is there something else on the network that's causing it? All right. Is everything powered on? Is everything plugged in? Is everything connected? Are Ethernet cables terminated correctly? Meaning, am I getting all, is it just powering up, or am I not getting the data correctly? Is it a bad Ethernet cable? Everybody's done this type of troubleshooting before, okay? And you guys know to look, okay, I plug it in, but the network lights aren't flashing. Well, let's switch a port. Let's try a different cable. This stuff is very easy. One thing that we talked about PoE. Is it the correct PoE? Okay. This is more what you guys run into. Internet connection troubleshooting. Okay. Does my device have an IP address? When we talked about how internet works, okay, it goes from the internet to the router, to the switch, to the access point device, if there is an access point. There's a lot of things in the chain. So the first thing to look at is my device, my phone, my computer, whatever it is, getting an IP address. Can I log into the router would be the next step. Maybe it's getting an IP address, but do I have access to the router? Am I on the correct network? All right. Does the router have a WAN IP address? Meaning, is the cable modem router giving you a LAN IP address of like a 192 or a 10 dot, or is it giving you your public IP? And the next thing is, can I ping the router's default gateway? Can I ping Google? Can I ping the router? Whatever it is. Can I ping 8.8.8? Okay, if you guys don't know, 8.8.8.8 is one of Google's IP addresses. Can I ping google.com? Only reboot a device with the issue. This is really important. A lot of guys will come in and they'll say, I've got an issue. Let's power cycle everything. Okay, that's not the way to troubleshoot, because first of all, if you repower everything, you don't know what was the issue to begin with. The issue may come back. Secondly, some devices don't auto-save changes. So if you're messing with a switch, a managed switch, and all of a sudden, and you forget to hit save to startup config when you leave the job site, that switch is running great. Well, all of a sudden there's no internet, and you tell a customer or an installer comes out and just power cycles everything, all those changes you made to that switch are lost because you did not save it to startup config. Okay, so it's never just power cycle everything unless you have to. Power cycle one device at a time and find the issue. So when we get into troubleshooting, the first thing we want to do is, do I have an IP address? If you don't, you want to check the connection, power, etc. If I do, and it comes back as a 169.254, whatever, all right, that means you're connected to a switch, you're connected to a device, but it's not getting an IP address. Okay, so first thing to look at is there's no DHCP server on the network, meaning is my router turned on? Is my cable connected to the router properly? Some of those troubleshooting steps. Next one, if it is my IP address correct? Okay, you're going to want to go into the device and verify the IP settings. Maybe somebody set it to a static IP, and now manually put in your IP address, your gateway, your DNS, your subnet into that device, into your laptop, into your phone, into whatever you're trying to connect from, and it's not the same thing. Maybe an installer went from one job site to the other, or maybe a customer took their laptop to work and had to manually put in the info and forgot to set it back to DHCP. Anybody that's worked on network has done that. And next thing you know, you're scratching your head and you realize, oh crap, I forgot to set it back to DHCP. Next thing is it the correct subnet? If you're going into a commercial application or certain things, the subnet changes sometimes. Maybe instead of a 255.255.255.0, it's a 248 subnet. Whatever it is, that can change. A lot of times by changing the subnet, if you're bouncing between job sites or facilities, whatever it is, a lot of times that may fix it. Otherwise, if you're using DHCP, is it the correct DHCP server settings? If it isn't, a lot of times you may have a rogue DHCP server. The one thing that always happens that is the biggest nightmare to troubleshoot is you walk into a guy's person's house or even a job site and a commercial setting, whatever it is. And next thing you know, the customer says, hey, some devices all of a sudden quit working. I don't know what it is. Intermittent issues are the hardest thing to troubleshoot. And you do an IP scan and you find out that there's multiple devices on the network that have the same IP address. Or it's not even in the same IP scheme. Your router is set to a 192.168.0.1, and all of a sudden some of these devices are getting a 1.1. You plug in your computer, you get a 1.1. You go, well, there's an issue. You find out that the client needed some extra ports in his home theater, in his office, in his garage. He didn't know what the heck the difference between a switch and a router was, or maybe he had an old router laying in the area, in a closet, and he didn't realize it, and he plugged it in because he thought it was just another switch. Well, all of a sudden that router is now giving out IP addresses too, and you've got two brains in the system trying to fight and tell each other what they need to do. So I run into it a ton troubleshooting and finding rogue DHCP servers on the network, Apple airports, all of these different things that just cause issues. If that's going through and you find out and you find those issues, you're going to go back and you're going to relook at, what do I have the IP address? And you're going to literally kind of do this in a loop and re-troubleshoot. Okay. Now to isolate the issue as well, my speeds are slow. How many times have you guys heard, my speeds are slow, from a customer? Okay, first question you should ask, are they slow on both wired and wireless? Most of the time customers say no, that it's wireless only. I don't hardwire, I don't know. Okay, if it's only wireless, is it on all access points? Meaning, well, my speeds were slow when I was sitting out on the deck. Well, of course they are, because you don't have an outdoor access point. So where were you in the house or in the facility when your speeds were slow? Is it everywhere, or is it only certain spots? So what I would do if I were you, going out there, relocate the access points. Most access points are easily able to be popped on and off you may need a ladder, but switch the access points to different locations and see if it follows the location, the access point, or if it's strictly in that location. If it's in the location, you may have to relocate that access point where it's at, or add another one. Maybe there's concrete wall you didn't know about, whatever it is that's causing that area to not get a great coverage. If it follows the access point, then you might have a faulty access point or just an incorrect configuration if you're not using a wireless controller. If no, then you want to check cable, switch, location, whatever it is. You're going to, if it's yes on the hardwired, you're going to want to check the switch. Or on the network or wireless, you want to check, maybe change the channel. Sometimes you got to go in, you got to change channels on access points. It's just the way wireless works. A neighbor moved in, now they're blasting the same channel you are, whatever it is. Also, maybe it's just change frequency or check the signal strength. Like I said, customer came in and all of a sudden they put a bunch of mirrors on one wall. Well, a lot of mirrors have a lead backing or metal backing behind that mirror, reflective surfaces. All of a sudden that degrades the wireless signal. So even though the facility was great signal strength throughout when you did the install, the end user may have came back and done stuff to the house to change the artifacting in that facility. Now, the next question is, how do you isolate a hardwired issue? We went through some of that already for checking IP addresses and everything else how it works. There's some great tools out there. First, network scanners. You can find network scanners everywhere. I'm going to give you some in a bit. All right, you scan a network, you're going to find all the devices on the network. You're going to find devices on other subnets. You're going to be able to check to see if there's duplicate IP addresses. Maybe somebody said a static IP or in a device you didn't know about. You're going to be able to see if there's duplicate MAC addresses. Not supposed to be any duplicate MAC addresses, but I've seen it happen. Okay. As well as you're going to be able to see documentation of your network. Some great IP scanners. If you're going in there with a laptop, advanced IP scanner or Angry IP. If you're going with a Mac laptop, Angry IP scanner works on both Windows and Mac. LANScan works on only Mac. Thing works on both iOS and Android. And if you guys are doing Luxil routers, you'll probably be wanting to do Domot. Domot has all of this built into it as well. So when we look at, let's just look at advanced IP scanner here. You're going to be able to put in your IP range. Right now we're searching for the whole range from 100.1 to 100.254. That's going to scan your whole network, and it's going to bring up every device on your network. You can see the list there. Okay. Once I hit the big green play button, the scan button, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to scan your network. It's going to give you the info below. 80 alive, 7 dead, 167 unknown. Okay. When you see 7 dead, that means that somebody's rescanned that house already. Maybe you're back at the same job site. There's 7 less devices than there was before. Now let's look at this right here. Jared's MacBook is 110 or 140. You can easily now search through and see where everything's at. You can then save this as well. I always recommend doing a network scan and saving it and putting in your documentation. When you're at the job site, scan it, save it. It's great because if somebody calls and says, hey, there's something going on, you can go back out to the job site, rescan the network before you touch anything, and reference your previous scan. You're either going to maybe see if a switch or an access point is down, or is there other devices that have been added to the network since you were there last. It's a very great tool. It only takes a minute to scan your network and save it into a file. So anytime you do a network, scan it before you leave the job site. It gives versus writing anything down. It's a great tool. So these are some of the things, and I know I breezed over a lot of it because there is a lot to cover. I try and keep this thing to 20 minutes. It went almost 40, guys, and I apologize. I really do. There are, if you guys want to learn more, you can reach out to myself. I'd love to talk to you guys about just networking in general, any projects you guys may have, maybe it's specific products. I don't know, but you can reach out to myself. You can reach out to most networking companies, whether it's Ingenious, whether it's Luxil, whoever you're working with. They all have great resources. For Luxil, you can go to the networking courses. They've got IP networking basics. They've got wireless networking basics. They've got wireless controllers. If you guys are doing wireless, you need, and you missed my part 1, you need to look at the wireless controllers and how that works. Secure remote network access, VLANs. They also have internet management for Domots, router limits, all of those things. They also have website events, so live webinars, live trainings, all that stuff, and they have online recordings to the dealer portal. So hop on Luxil's website or Ingenious or whoever you're working with. So my question, do you guys have any questions? I've got some rolling in here. So the first question is there security concern when scanning the network with a free scan program? Just for scanning, no. I've never ran into something that's got that there's a security concern on. If you're worried about, it's really actually kind of scary how much info you can get from a network scan. you're not going to, I've never seen somebody inject a virus or anything else doing a network scan. Most of those are going to infect the computer while you're downloading a program, downloading the scan program. By just scanning the network, no. But it's really crazy on what you can find doing a network scan. And an improper setup, let's say I've went into a lot of places, a lot of commercial facilities that don't have client isolation enabled, and you do a network scan and you can see everybody's device on that network. So there's a lot of powerful stuff now, but worried about injecting something into the network that's going to cause issues from a scan? No. All the scan is doing is it's looking for the MAC address, the info via UDP, and there isn't going to be really any network securities on that front. Hopefully that answers your question. The next question is, what is DOMATS? If you want to look into it, it's built into almost all of Luxel's routers. If you're using a third-party router, we actually have a DOMATS box you can put on the network. DOMATS is a really cool device that will let you it'll let you do remote monitoring. So I can log into my DOMATS portal, and I can see everything on my network. So if you're troubleshooting and you're installed networks throughout, whether you're doing it locally throughout town or worldwide, you can see every network you've installed, which is really great because it also gives you notifications if something went off a line. I can then also don't need to set up a VPN or a DNS account because that's all built into DOMATS as well. I can actually get into every device on that network that I have access to. There's power cycling, there's remote, there's so many features. That's a webinar all in itself. I've actually done webinars on DOMATS. And if you want to know more, I would recommend hop on the Luxel website, hop on the DOMATS website. And the way it's spelled is actually DOMOTZ. Z is in zebra. So hopefully that helps. And again, you want to know more about DOMATS. You want to know more about how to be able to manage this and maybe make some RMR, some return on investment, monthly payments from your end customers. DOMATS is a great option for that as well. Next question is, should a hardwired port on a router be the same speed as what the modem is showing? Yes and no. Ideally, yes. If it's not, there's some differences in hardware, meaning it could be that your router that you got, it may say gigabit router. Let's say you've got a modem that says it's a full 1 gig connection. You plug into that modem, you're getting a gig up and down. You plug into the router, you're getting 600 or 800 or whatever meg up and down. Probability is you bought a gigabit router, but like the ABR 4500, it doesn't have the throughput WAN to LAN. Okay, the gigabit switch built into the meaning that 4-port switch is full gigabit, but the LAN port is not capable of doing full gigabit WAN to LAN. It also depends on how many devices are needing that connection and where are you testing from. There's so many places to know where is your speed coming from. The proper way to test would be to plug into the modem, test the speed. Unplug everything from the router except your computer, test the speed again. So there's nothing else that's sucking up that bandwidth. And slowly, as you plug in more and more devices, that bandwidth, that one port going to your modem, is going to be shared across all devices that are on there. So obviously your speed is going to go down just a hair. Depending on how many devices you have on it, it may go down dramatically. And is it hardwired or wireless? So network speed is always a fun one to talk to a customer because it's like a garden hose. The more you could go Y connectors, you can put on so many different splices, but in the end, the one garden hose that's feeding to your spigot is how much water can go through that no matter what. So even though you got 100 connections on the outside, all that water is going through one garden hose. So testing a network, you always want to start at the beginning and go out from there. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions, guys? I covered a lot of stuff and I breezed through a lot of stuff because there was a lot to cover. I can't imagine that I answered everybody's question. Now, I do know that how webinars work, you can't think of anything right now. As soon as I stop the webinar, question's going to pop up. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to your local account manager at Capital. Feel free to reach out to the networking company you're looking at using, Luxel, Ingenious, whatever it is. Okay. My recommendation to you is if you try to call the manufacturer and they're not willing to help you on a networking system or answer your questions, you may want to look at a different network manufacturer because, you know, networking, a lot of times you need support for troubleshooting other little things. And when you're jumping between network manufacturers, sometimes wording isn't always the same too. So the next question is, when will you do a webinar on creating guest networks and VLANs? You know, that's a great question. And the answer is I don't know. It is a specialized network, and the reason I'm not sure is because Luxel already has a great webinar on it, and it's only 20 minutes. It's already YouTube. It's nice video on it. They did a great job. So a lot of times, it's hard to choose because what to do because I only do webinars once every 2 weeks, and only 20 minutes. So, and there's a lot to cover. Capital's got 150 lines. So it's very hard for me to do more than just, you know, part 1 and 2 kind of on networking. If I do get enough requests on it, I will definitely, you know, try and get that on the docket. Also, if you guys do have questions on anything specific, like setting up guest networks and VLANs, feel free to reach out to me. I'll definitely, you know, take as much time as needed and help you guys through it. You know, answer any questions or point you and say, hey, here's a great video on it, whatever it is. We're here to help. The next question is there a webinar on the basic setup for wireless router with a controller of access points? Not specifically the setup, but I did just do a webinar part 1 on how access points work, when to use a wireless controller, what is a wireless controller, and why you need a wireless controller, whatever that is, and the difference between using wireless controller versus mesh network versus repeaters, all of that was in part 1. And again, I would be happy again to help you guys out. If you guys have any questions on that, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, Luxel as well has a great video on wireless controllers and roaming and how to set that up. So a lot of great resources. If you guys want to take it but can't find the videos, feel free to reach out. I can help you guys get those links as well. So any other questions, guys? Well, guys, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day. You know, like I said, this webinar was supposed to be 20 minutes. It ended up being almost 50 minutes. But again, I want to thank you guys for coming on. It means a lot. I couldn't keep doing these webinars if you guys didn't, you know, started to not show up. So I want to thank you guys. And if you guys need anything, again, feel free to reach out to Capital or myself. We're here to help out or answer any questions you guys may need. So again, guys, thanks.